Alleluia. Om Mani Padme. Om. Allah.
Welcome to the new season of Harmony and Diversity. Norm Currie is my name. This series we intend to explore the harmony of faith and society at all levels. And today we're speaking with Freeman Trebilcock, a Buddhist monk. Thank you very much for coming, Freeman.
Thank you, Norm.
You're a young Anglo-Saxon man. How are you a Buddhist monk? Give us a story. It's
a very funny question, isn't it? Yeah, how did I end up like this, dressed like I am? Yeah. So my mother, the story starts much before my birth. My mum was a bit of a hippie. In the 70s, she hitchhiked up from Melbourne to the Sunshine Coast for the first ever Tibetan Buddhist Lama visiting Australia in 1976. And she, I guess, was part of that first wave of Tibetan Buddhists who connected with it very early on. So when I was born, I was actually brought up in and around sort of the Buddhist community in Australia. For me, the connection was always quite strong there. I wanted to, I guess, pursue the Buddhist faith. Figure out what it meant, what it was all about, what I could learn and how it would affect my life. So for me, the choice to become a monk actually was quite a natural one for me.
So that as a child, you were exposed to this all the way through your life.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think I met the Dalai Lama the first time when I was 8. So yeah, so I was from a very young age I was around those kinds of sort of great spiritual teachers in the Buddhist tradition, and we would always go to the teachings that were on, or the initiations or things like that. And I also had my own sort of inclination, wish to be there. I guess you could say that I had, from a Buddhist perspective, you'd say that I had strong karma, strong karmic connection to Buddhism.
And how did that, as a young child and as a teenager, you're not in a Buddhist society at large.
No.
So how did you find that? Do you find yourself outside of the square, or what?
It can be quite challenging in our society to be someone from a faith such as Buddhism. I think Buddhism has a pretty good brand, generally speaking. Yes, so I didn't cop a lot of flack directly for being a Buddhist, but I think most people my age, younger people, faith doesn't really play a big part of their life. And so to have someone who's really living it, trying to embody their spirituality as kind of a central focus of their life is quite strange for a lot of people of my generation. So for them, I guess a lot of my friends, I was a bit different than others. But for me, my Buddhist practice and understanding was kind of like a grounding. It really kept me on track, and I think more than anything else, I lent on my Buddhistness in times of crisis. So I would, when I was struggling, all teenagers go through a lot of difficulties as part of growing up.
That's right, yes.
So for me, I would at those times I was really, really glad to have this frame of reference, this amazing storehouse of wisdom that is the Buddhist tradition to go to, I guess, find some useful tools to deal with things.
How does that manifest itself? Like a Christian would go to the Bible and a Muslim to the Quran. Which of the Buddhist texts would you go to?
So we don't have a similar kind of text in terms of the Bible. I mean, the closest thing would be the sutras, which is the words of the Buddha. Yes. But even the sutras are over 100 volumes, so it's not like there's something you can become familiar with. The main things that I would use actually are the teachings by contemporary Buddhist teachers, such as my mum's teacher, Lama Yeshe, or my teacher, Lama Zopa, and of course anything by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So they usually provide a commentary on the traditional text, which is extremely useful. So loads of commentaries in the Buddhist tradition and commentaries on the commentaries. So,
well, that's interesting because you're not reliant on antiquity. It's constantly being updated.
absolutely.
In a modern context.
That's true, and I think that's, I don't know if that's unique to Buddhism, but it's certainly one of Buddhism's strong points, is it's not really afraid of modernity, of things evolving. And the Buddha himself said, you know, my words, you should interrogate them, investigate them, and see if they're true. If they're useful, then you adopt them. But if you don't find them relevant to your life, then kind of forget them. So that idea is built into Buddhism from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's very freewheeling in a way, and a somewhat banal question, but being a vegetarian, how did that spin out? Because perhaps with your age, maybe it's not the case, but vegetarian restaurants, vegetarian food was of a very poor level early on.
In the country particularly. I grew up in a country town, so it wasn't easy. I think, but actually I grew up with a lot of kind of alternative people, I guess.
Yes.
So there was that culture around there of, you know, healthy living and good, you know, also most importantly, living a lifestyle that's not really damaging to other beings and the environment.
Yes.
So I think there actually was a lot of supportive people around me, which made things like that quite easy.
Yes, because your mum would have drawn them into the circle.
Yeah, I was actually, I have to say, if I didn't have a mum or a family who was so, I guess, encouraging and supportive, I think throughout time I probably would have drifted away from the Buddhist tradition. And there are a lot of young Buddhists, in my similar situation to me actually, who they grew up in a Buddhist family or with Buddhist parents, and they're not interested at all, and because their parents didn't encourage it, didn't support it, didn't think it was valuable. So for me, I think having that influence in my life has been a really key thing in actually keeping a focus and a clear understanding of what I'm doing with my life. So,
thank you, Freeman. We need to go to a break, and we'll return shortly, talking with Freeman Trebilcock. Welcome back to Harmony and Diversity. Norm Currie is my name, and we're speaking with Freeman, who is a Buddhist monk. Freeman, thank you for your time. You mentioned earlier that as a child, your Buddhist practices, what did they look like as a child? You know, 8, 9, 10. What are Buddhist practices in that context?
Sure. So growing up, I never really had a solid sort of meditation practice or anything like that. I still struggle to have a daily practice and keep that routine, to be honest. It's a discipline. But for me, the strongest parts of my Buddhist expression when I was younger was, I guess, reading and going to teachings and attending sort of empowerments or initiations or Buddhist ceremonies, basically. So they're scheduled, so every sort of fortnight a ceremony will be done, or every week, or so on and so forth. So for us, for our tradition, the community kind of provides it, and so that provides that. And so you go along when you can. In terms of the meditation side of things, the reason I think I struggled was meditation is very much left up to you, what your practice is and what it should be. There are heaps of guidelines for developing a meditation practice and the things that you can do and how to, I guess, construct a good meditation for yourself. But it really depends on you and your mind and what you need. So there are many different forms of meditation in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So for me as a young person, I really liked just, calm abiding meditation, which is focusing on the breath and stilling the mind. But there are other meditations which are around developing positive qualities in the mind, such as developing compassion or a balanced state of mind and so forth. So there's plenty in terms of tools. For a young person, I guess the question is, what do I do? Where do I go? And that's the big question I think a lot of people have is, what's right for me?
And how do you measure success?
Good question. Yeah, how do you measure success? I mean, the process in Buddhism is quite clear what you're doing.
Yes.
And it's very practical. It's you know, so it's not, because it's an internally focused religion in the sense of it's about your own awakening and your own enlightenment is the real
Yes.
ultimate goal. I guess what you're doing is the steps along that path.
Okay.
There are amazing explanations. There's a particular form of teaching called Lamrim, which is literally means light on the path, which is basically it's an explanation of the path to enlightenment as the Buddhists see it. And along that, they do talk about particular things you have to develop. You know, there's the development of compassion. That's a quality that we want to develop. There's the development of renunciation or letting go, not being attached. And there's the development of wisdom, the cultivation of wisdom, which is about correctly understanding reality. And that goes to the heart of actually the Buddhist worldview, which is that the main reason for our suffering is our ignorance, our lack of knowledge of reality. So I guess if you want to measure your success as a Buddhist, you can look to how compassionate are you,
Yes.
how unattached are you, or, you know,
Yes.
or on the other way, how stuck and clinging are you, and then how wise are you? You know, what's your grip on reality? You know, and how in tune are you? I guess with the way things are.
And your teacher, is that your reference point?
Absolutely, particularly in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the teacher plays a pivotal role. In fact, the guru or the lama, as the Tibetan Buddhists call them, they are almost like, you could almost say, more important than the Buddha as the figure.
Okay.
So they're elevated to that because they are your guide, they're your reference point, and they're the ones who, I guess, help you along the path. The Buddha is the ultimate teacher, but for Tibetan Buddhists, for Vajrayanists, the Lama takes on a special quality. And I've been really fortunate in my life to have some really special teachers, special Lamas, including someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Yes.
You know, and they're not just examples, they're providing you step-by-step tools and instructions. And it's an inspiration, really, to know that it's possible.
Yes.
So,
The term guru is also it's sort of parallel to Hinduism too,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, the same sort of
absolutely.
element there.
And
Yeah.
look, Buddhism came out of Hinduism. It grew. I mean, Buddha was a part of in that
The
part of the
Hindu
world.
culture.
In that.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that. So, and a lot of Hindus might actually claim Buddha as a Hindu. I've heard that said before.
Yes.
But in terms of the language and also the iconography, and even some of the particularly Tibetan Buddhist practices, when you're talking about meditational techniques, they're very much borrowed from Hinduism, and the parallels are sort of totally clear. So.
Yes, as far as values are concerned, what sits behind vegetarianism? What's the principle which sits behind that?
So, I guess one of the core values of Buddhism is non-harmfulness or non-violence.
Yes.
And so that needs to be carried through in all of the things that you do in your life. So non-harmfulness doesn't mean just not actually punching someone, but it means, you know, I mean, how are we harming in the way that we eat, you know, in what we wear, in the way how we use energy. I think these are really relevant things for our world today, actually.
Yes.
Because people can see there's a lot of damage, there's a lot of violence actually in the Western culture. I mean, it's across all cultures, but
Yes.
I think particularly people can see there's something wrong to the way that we're behaving, and
Yes.
something kind of violent about it. And so vegetarianism, I guess, fits into that ideal of, well, you know, look at the violence that is being inflicted on other creatures as a result of sort of the way that we eat.
Yes.
But also there's another level which I think needs to be understood, in that in Buddhism we treat animals as, I want to be careful how I say this, not equal to humans, but I guess they have the same potential as human beings.
Yes.
They're in the same category, because really we're all what we call semchen, which in Tibetan literally means consciousness haver. So we all have minds, animals and humans, and, you know, all range of creatures with a mind, which means that we have the capacity to experience suffering. So every being that can experience suffering, I guess we have to have a certain amount of respect, because our actions towards them can inflict sort of damage, inflict that suffering.
Right.
And the other aspect is, everything with a mind, according to the Buddhist worldview, is actually a potential Buddha, is a potential awakened being. So there's a level of respect which you need to have towards the potential Buddha, which is in everybody, and the wish to see them awaken and them grow, rather than the wish to damage them and harm them. So.
Right. So that's the roots for the whole concept of compassion across all beingness.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The core of it is that beings are suffering because they have a mind, but that suffering is not necessary. And so cultivating compassion towards the suffering of all beings is, I guess, a core value in the Buddhist tradition.
Thank you, Freeman. We'll need to go to a break. We'll go to a break now and we'll return.
Om Mani Padme. Alleluia. Om Mani Padme.
You're watching Harmony and Diversity. Norm Currie is my name, and we're speaking today to Freeman Trebilcock, who is a Buddhist monk. And we're exploring what it is to be a Buddhist monk, and Freeman, you've given us a very insightful commentary on that. Could we explore the guru, the relationship of that guru relationship that you've had, and I've seen some of the people that you have studied in connection with, pretty impressive. How does that work? What do you do? You sit at their feet? How does it happen?
It's a good question, and I think it's a difficult one to answer, because I think everyone has a slightly different relationship with their guru.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I met one of my root gurus, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when I was very young. He is the disciple of my mother's teacher, Lama Yeshe, who was the first Tibetan Buddhist to come to Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And so that connection to that lineage is there for me. I guess I met him the first time when I was very young, probably 3, but I don't remember that. But when I was a little bit older, I made a proper connection with him and actually asked him if he would ordain me, if he would give me robes. So he did a lot of sort of checking and thinking about it, and investigation, whether or not it would be beneficial for me to do or not. And then I guess he said, look, yeah, okay, I'm happy to do that. And so that, I think, was for me the first serious teacher-student relationship that I had, and he still remains my root guru, actually, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So when I need his advice, he doesn't live in Australia, so it's not so easy. So when I need his advice, I write to him, and I've had a couple of phone calls as well throughout the time. Nice. So, you write, and you get advice, and usually you need to be quite clear about what you're struggling with, because there's not much time really. So, and you also want to make sure that you are using that relationship well. Right. There's a saying that the guru, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, you view the guru as almost like a Buddha, almost like as a divine being. Right. But the idea behind viewing them in that way is not because they need you to worship them. And it's not about glorifying them. On some level, it's about diminishing your own ego. But the most important reason, the core reason why you do that, is actually because we know that we create our perception on a lot of levels, or at least that we're implicated in what we experience. We play a role, and so it's not like there's an external guru out there. And then there's poor me over here who knows nothing. So if you view the guru as a Buddha, you're actually interdependently, you're creating that situation for a real deep, authentic teaching to be transmitted. Because what you're actually doing is you're I guess, transforming your impure perception into a pure perception of that teacher. And then the teaching almost arises interdependently. So you couldn't say that it comes from them or if it comes from you, but actually between the coming together of a student whose mind is and motivation is in the right place, and the teacher who also has to have the knowledge and have a positive altruistic intention, and have also pacified their own mind. In that connection, that's actually where the real teaching takes place, and the real Dharma is transmitted.
That's very subtle.
Yeah.
Yes. So, so you would require, as you said, that both the teacher and the student need to have an intense commitment to that
Absolutely.
internal development. Yes.
Absolutely. And we use the word samaya actually to refer to that commitment, and it's like an unbreakable bond. And they say the number one reason for your own, if you're struggling, if you've got some issue you're dealing with, usually the number one reason is you've sort of had a break in samaya, and you need to check back and go, okay, where is it? What have I done? And for me, definitely, I've had moments where my samaya or my commitment to my teacher has waned a little bit.
Yes.
And it's so that then you kind of don't make any progress because you're off on your own, you're off on a tangent, you're off on your own thing, what you think's really, really important, and sometimes it's not what you should be doing. So for me, that relationship with the teacher is all about checking my own motivation and saying, okay, what's this like? Particularly when the situation is a challenging one. I have other teachers as well, and there are moments definitely where you're challenged by them. You're definitely challenged by your guru. And how do you sit with that? If it's something that's coming up in your mind, like, I can't believe he said that, or I have my own life as well, things like that come up. I guess, how do you deal with that? And not in the sense of repressing yourself, but I guess getting in tune with your own mind and getting in tune with sort of the reality of the situation, not just your own perception, not just your own confusion.
The interfaith interaction, I should say, between, say, Christians or Muslims, they will be quoting Jesus said this or Muhammad said that. When Buddhists are together, say in your order, what's the discourse between? My guru said this, or what is it?
It does include Buddha said this and that. Definitely people quote the sutras a lot. They also quote commentaries a lot. There's more commentary than there is original text in the Tibetan Buddhist. And what they study particularly is all commentaries. But actually it's really interesting. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition is founded on a culture of debate and inquiry. And so they might, in the morning, the monks and nuns in the monastery will go to a teaching for a couple of hours and listen to the teacher, but then they'll go into the debate courtyard for 6 or 7 hours and debate what they'd heard and have dialogue and conversation and pull it apart and interrogate it. And that's they talk about that as being the real place where the learning happens. So that idea, I think, modern people like that because it's important, we know, to pull things apart and interrogate them and figure out if they're real or not.
Well, I'm very interested to debate further, and I'd like to invite you to come to the next session and cover this fascinating topic.
I'd be more than happy to.
Thank you very much, Freeman. You've been watching Harmony in Diversity, and we'll be seeing you next week. Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allah.